On December 12, 1942, the frigid winds swept through the detention facility in occupied Poland. Helena Citrónová clutched her thin garment around her shoulders as she stood in formation, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. The 23-year-old Slovakian woman believed this would be just another day of misery in a place designed to break the human spirit. She could not have imagined that on this very day, an encounter would alter the course of her existence in ways that defied all expectations in the brutal landscape of the European conflict. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how an unexpected human connection formed in the darkest of circumstances, revealing how compassion can emerge even in systems designed to eliminate it, and how one person's decision to recognize humanity in another would create a lifeline where none should have existed. Helena had arrived at the facility in spring of that year, transported from her home in Humene, Slovakia. Previously a talented singer with dreams of a musical career, she now found herself catalogued as prisoner number 34,042, her identity reduced to digits tattooed on her arm. Her sister Rosinka had been transported with her, the only remnant of her once extensive family still within reach. Together, they clung to memories of their previous life, when their days had been filled with music and family gatherings, rather than hunger and fear. Captain Franz Wunsch served as a guard supervisor in the camp's processing section. At 30 years old, he had developed a reputation for unwavering adherence to regulations and efficient management of operations. Born in the small Austrian town of Vöcklabruck, he had been raised on nationalist ideology, his worldview shaped by propaganda that portrayed certain groups as enemies of the state. As a young man, he had joined the ruling party with conviction, believing completely in its vision for a transformed Europe. Wunsch's colleagues respected his methodical approach to duty. "Wunsch runs his section like clockwork," remarked Sergeant Otto Müller. "Everything in its proper place, everyone performing their assigned function, the man never wavers." The processing section, where Wunsch oversaw operations, handled the cataloguing and distribution of confiscated belongings. Thousands of suitcases containing personal items, clothing, photographs, jewelry, musical instruments, were sorted through daily by prisoner workers under his supervision. The German administration had calculated that this operation processed approximately 12,000 personal items each day, with valuables separated for transport to Berlin. What made the system especially efficient was that prisoners themselves were forced to sort through the possessions of other arrivals. This meant confronting the personal effects of people who might have come from their own towns, perhaps even people they knew. The psychological impact was deliberately crushing. The processing operation has increased efficiency by 37% under Wunsch's supervision, noted administrative officer Werner Schmidt in his monthly report. His attention to detail ensures maximum recovery of valuable materials while maintaining proper oversight of worker productivity. Helena had been assigned to the processing section 3 months after her arrival. Her task involved sorting clothing, removing any hidden valuables, and preparing items for redistribution or shipment. The work was mentally and emotionally exhausting, but marginally better than outdoor labor in the harsh Polish winter. Each day blended into the next, in a monotonous rhythm of survival. On that December morning, Wunsch was conducting a routine inspection of the sorting facility when he heard something unexpected, a voice singing softly in Slovak. The melody drifted through the cavernous room, somehow maintaining its beauty despite the surroundings. He followed the sound until he found its source, Helena Citrónová, singing quietly to herself as she sorted through a pile of children's clothing. "What is that song?" he asked in German, startling her into silence. Helena looked up, terrified. Prisoners were not permitted to speak unless directly addressed, and certainly not to sing. "A birthday song, sir," she responded hesitantly in her limited German. "Today is my birthday." Something in her voice and direct gaze caught Wunsch by surprise. For the briefest moment he saw not prisoner 34,042, but a young woman with intelligent eyes and remarkable composure despite her circumstances. "Continue," he said after a pause, then walked away. Later that day, during the evening meal distribution, A guard approached Helena with a small package wrapped in paper. "From Captain Wunsch," the guard said curtly, dropping it beside her bowl of thin soup. Inside, Helena found a piece of bread and a single apple, luxuries in the camp environment where starvation was a deliberate policy. She quickly hid these treasures, aware that such special treatment could make her a target among desperate fellow prisoners. Rosinka, Helena's sister, regarded the gift with suspicion. "Why would he give you food? What does he want?" she whispered. "I don't know," Helena replied truthfully. "I was singing and he heard me." "Be careful," Rosinka warned. "Any attention from them is dangerous." For 2 weeks, nothing further occurred. Helena continued her work, occasionally aware of Wunsch observing the sorting operation from his office overlooking the main floor. Then, one afternoon, he approached her workstation directly. "You were a singer before?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, sir, in Humene." "My mother sang in a choir in Linz," he said, then seemed surprised by his own revelation. After an uncomfortable silence, he added, "Work efficiently, Hess," and walked away. These brief interactions continued over subsequent weeks, moments of unexpected conversation amid the mechanical routine of the camp. Helena learned that Wunsch had studied music briefly before the war, that his sister played piano, that he had once considered a different path before political circumstances altered his trajectory. Dr. Marta Weiss, a Hungarian physician forced to work in the camp hospital, observed the developing situation with concern. "Human connection is dangerous here," she told Helena during a brief medical examination. "It creates vulnerability on both sides, but sometimes it is the only protection available." By February 1943, subtle changes had occurred in Wunsch's behavior toward the sorting operation. He assigned Helena to the indoor clothing section permanently, sparing her from the more physically demanding tasks. He occasionally left small food items where she would find them, an extra ration of bread, a boiled potato, once even a small piece of chocolate. The supervisor seems to have developed an interest in prisoner 34,042, reported Officer Erich Neumann to the camp administration. "I recommend reassignment to maintain proper discipline." When confronted by his superior, Wunsch defended his actions as pragmatic management. "She works efficiently and has organizational skills useful for maintaining productivity," he stated. "The additional rations ensure continued performance." His explanation was accepted, if somewhat skeptically. The systematic nature of the camp operated on rationality and productivity. If Wunsch could frame his actions within those parameters, he could maintain his unusual arrangement. For Helena, these small gestures represented the difference between life and death. The extra food not only sustained her, but also allowed her to occasionally share with Rosinka, whose work assignment in another section was more physically demanding. The sisters survived the winter of 1942 to 1943, when many others perished from cold, starvation, and disease. "She speaks to him sometimes," reported Magda Hellinger, a prisoner functionary from Slovakia who worked as a block supervisor. "Nothing improper, just answers his questions. But he looks at her differently than he looks at the rest of us, as though remembering she is human." The true test of this unusual connection came unexpectedly in April 1943. A transport arrived from Theresienstadt, containing several families from Helena's hometown. Among them was her sister-in-law Gisela and her 2 young nieces, Vera and Lotta, ages 6 and 4. Helena recognized them during processing and felt her heart constrict with both joy and terror. Joy at seeing familiar faces from her previous life, terror at knowing what awaited most new arrivals, particularly those deemed unable to work. "My brother's wife and children," she whispered to Edith Klein, another worker in the sorting section. "They won't survive selection." Within the camp system, new arrivals underwent what was euphemistically called selection, a rapid assessment, determining who would be assigned to work details and who would be immediately eliminated. The process was ruthlessly efficient, with German doctors examining up to 3,000 people per hour. Those considered suitable for labor, typically only 20 to 30% of arrivals, were registered into the camp population. The remainder were separated for immediate dispatch. The selection criteria were purely utilitarian. Could the person perform labor? Children under 14, the elderly, pregnant women, and anyone appearing ill or disabled were automatically directed to immediate elimination. The system processed human beings as commodities, assessing value solely in terms of potential work output. Statistical data compiled by camp administrators documented that transports from Slovakia during this period averaged 23% retention for labor, with the remainder eliminated upon arrival. For children under 10 years old, the retention rate was effectively zero. Helena knew these facts not as abstract statistics, but as devastating reality. Her nieces Vera and Lotta would not pass selection. At ages 6 and 4, they were automatically categorized for elimination. Their mother Gisela might possibly be selected for work, though the policy typically kept mothers with young children rather than separating families. In desperation, Helena sought out Wunsch during his afternoon inspection. Breaking all protocols, she approached him directly, risking severe punishment. "Captain," she said quietly, "my brother's wife and children arrived today. Please, is there anything you can do?" Wunsch's face hardened. "You forget yourself, prisoner," he said loudly enough for others to hear. Then, more quietly, "I will see what information I can find." That evening, Helena waited in agony, unable to eat, unable to sleep. Rosinka held her hand in silence, both women understanding the impossibility of what Helena had asked. No one interfered with selections. The process was sacred within the camp hierarchy. The next morning, Wunsch appeared at Helena's workstation. "Your sister-in-law has been registered as prisoner 46,879, he said without emotion. "She has been assigned to the clothing repair section." Helena felt momentary relief, followed by crushing realization. "And the children?" Wunsch looked away. "I could not intervene there. The system has specific protocols." For the first time, Helena saw something like shame cross his features. The man who had shown small kindnesses had encountered the limits of his influence, or perhaps the limits of what he was willing to risk for her. That night, Helena wept silently in her bunk, mourning the nieces she had glimpsed only briefly. Rosinka held her, their shared grief beyond words. "How can he claim to care for me yet allow this to happen?" Helena whispered. "He is part of the machine," Rosinka replied. "Perhaps he cannot see beyond it, even for you." The following weeks brought a noticeable cooling in the interactions between Helena and Wunsch. He continued to ensure her work assignment remained in the sorting section, but no longer engaged in personal conversation. The small food gifts ceased. Something had fractured between them. His inability or unwillingness to save her family members created a chasm neither could easily bridge. This might have been the end of their connection had circumstances not intervened dramatically 3 months later. In July 1943, a clerical error in the camp administration resulted in Rosinka's name being added to a transport list for another section of the camp complex, one with significantly worse conditions and survival rates. When Helena learned of her sister's impending transfer, she fell into despair. Rosinka was her last remaining family member, her only anchor to their shared past and hope for the future. Separation would likely mean never seeing each other again. "I would rather die with her than survive alone," Helena confided to Gisela, her sister-in-law, now working in the clothing repair section. Gisela, still processing her own unimaginable loss, grasped Helena's hands. "You must continue for those who cannot." With no other option, Helena sought out Wunsch again. Despite their estrangement, he remained her only potential avenue for intervention. Finding him alone in the sorting facility office, she took the enormous risk of speaking frankly. "They are transferring my sister tomorrow," she said without preamble. "She is all I have left." Wunsch regarded her with an unreadable expression. "These decisions come from administration. I have no authority to change transfer orders." "Then I have nothing left to live for," Helena said simply. Something in her tone, not pleading but stating a fact, seemed to reach him. After a long pause, Wunsch asked, "Your sister's number?" 38,205, Helena replied, hope flickering despite herself. "I will see what can be done," he said. "Now return to your station before you are reported." The next morning, when the transport list was read, Rosinka's name was absent. Instead, she received new assignment papers to the clothing repair section, where she could work alongside Gisela. Someone else's name had replaced hers on the transport list. Another woman who would face whatever fate had been intended for Rosinka. This intervention marked a significant escalation in Wunsch's actions. No longer was he merely providing small comforts or preferable work assignments. He had actively manipulated official documentation, placing himself at considerable risk. Such actions, if discovered, could result in his own punishment or transfer to combat duty on the Eastern Front, where German forces were experiencing heavy casualties against the Soviet advance. "He must have falsified documents," Rosinka whispered when they met briefly during the midday meal. "Why would he do this?" "I think he sees me," Helena replied slowly. "Not as they want us to be seen, but as a person. And through me, perhaps he sees you too." This realization brought complicated emotions. Helena felt gratitude for her sister's safety, but also the heavy burden of responsibility. Wunsch had taken a significant risk for her sake. What would he expect in return? And how could she reconcile any feelings towards someone who remained a willing participant in the system that had destroyed her family and community? Edith Klein, who had observed the developing situation, offered her perspective during a rare moment when prisoners could speak privately. "In this place, survival comes before judgment," she said. "Whatever keeps you alive is what you must do. The time for moral questions is for after, if we live to see it." As summer progressed into autumn of 1943, the relationship between Helena and Wunsch evolved into something neither could have anticipated. He arranged for her to work in the administrative section of the sorting facility, a position that kept her indoors and required more intellectual than physical labor. He ensured both Rosinka and Gisela remained in the clothing repair section, rather than being assigned to more dangerous work. In return, Helena provided something Wunsch had not experienced since arriving at the camp: human connection unclouded by fear or sycophancy. Their conversations, always brief and outwardly professional, gradually revealed a man struggling to reconcile his indoctrinated beliefs with the reality before him. "Before the war, what did your family do?" he asked once, while reviewing inventory reports. "My father owned a small textile shop," Helena replied. "He taught all of us the business, how to recognize quality materials, how to keep proper accounts." "My father was a postal worker," Wunsch said after a moment. "He believed in order, in systems functioning correctly." He paused, then added more quietly, "I wonder what he would think of this system." These moments of reflection became more frequent. Wunsch, who had joined the party as an idealistic young man, found himself increasingly troubled by the gap between propaganda and reality. The systematic processing of human beings, once abstract and justified through dehumanizing ideology, became harder to rationalize when faced with individuals like Helena. In December 1943, exactly 1 year after their first interaction, Wunsch left a small package on Helena's workstation. Inside, she found a carefully preserved apple and a folded paper containing a short poem by Goethe, Wanderers Nachtlied, Wanderer's Night Song. The gesture acknowledged their shared humanity in a place designed to eradicate such recognition. That evening, Helena read the poem to Rosinka and Gisela in their barracks. The words spoke of peace descending upon the hilltops, of birds falling silent in the woods, of patience until rest comes at last. In the context of their circumstances, the poem carried both comfort and unbearable poignancy. "He is trying to be human in an inhuman place," Gisela observed. "Perhaps that is the most any of us can do now." As 1944 progressed, conditions in the camp deteriorated. The German forces faced increasing setbacks on multiple fronts, and resources became more scarce. Rations decreased, illness spread more rapidly, and the administration responded with harsher discipline to maintain control. In this worsening environment, the protection Wunsch provided became even more critical. When typhus swept through the women's section in February, he arranged for Helena, Rosinka, and Gisela to receive medical attention from Dr. Weiss, treatment that saved Rosinka's life when she contracted the disease. Your sister would not have survived without the medicine, Dr. Weiss told Helena frankly. Whatever your feelings about this man, he has preserved your family when thousands of others have been lost. The moral complexity of their situation weighed heavily on Helena. She recognized that her survival and that of her sister and sister-in-law depended on the actions of someone who remained part of the system that had murdered her nieces and countless others. Yet she also witnessed his growing internal conflict, his small acts of sabotage, his increasingly desperate attempts to retain humanity in an environment designed to eliminate it. By summer 1944, rumors of German military setbacks circulated throughout the camp. Prisoners whispered about Soviet advances from the east, Allied landings in France, the possibility of liberation or, more frighteningly, elimination of witnesses as defeat loomed. Wunsch, with access to official communications, knew these rumors contained truth. The German forces were indeed retreating on multiple fronts. In July, he took an unprecedented risk by sharing information with Helena. "There may be evacuations soon," he told her, while examining inventory records. "The camp leadership is discussing contingency plans." Helena understood the implications immediately. "They will not leave witnesses." Wunsch did not contradict her. "If evacuation orders come, you and your sister must find ways to remain behind. Claim illness, hide if possible. Those who march will face uncertain destinations." This conversation represented a complete inversion of their original positions. The Guard was now actively working against the system he had once served, providing intelligence that could help prisoners survive. The line between captor and captive had blurred into something more complex, a shared recognition of impending historical forces about to sweep over them all. In September 1944, Wunsch received transfer orders to another facility closer to the German border. The camp administration, preparing for potential evacuation, was relocating personnel with specialized skills to facilities they intended to maintain longer. Before his departure, he arranged a final meeting with Helena in the inventory office. "I have prepared documents," he said, handing her a small packet hidden within requisition forms. "For you, your sister, and your sister-in-law. They identify you as essential administrative workers. If evacuation comes, show these to remain behind." Helena accepted the papers, understanding their potential value for survival. "What will happen to you? I will be reassigned, but I have requested copies of all sorting facility records. Your names and numbers are in my files. I can track your locations in the system." The implication was clear. He would continue to monitor their status and potentially intervene if possible. In a system built on anonymous processing of human beings, this personal tracking represented a profound subversion. "Why have you done these things?" Helena asked, the question that had lingered between them for nearly 2 years. Wunsch was silent for a long moment. "When I first heard you sing, I remembered something I had forgotten, that music exists, that beauty exists, that humans create rather than only destroy." He paused. "Once I remembered that, I could no longer see you as the system required. And once I saw you differently, eventually I began to see others differently too." This simple explanation captured the gradual transformation that had occurred, how recognition of one person's humanity had created expanding ripples of awareness. From Helena to her sister to others, Wunsch's perception had shifted incrementally until the entire ideological framework supporting the camp system began to fracture in his mind. After Wunsch's transfer, Helena and the others continued their daily struggle for survival. The forged documents he had provided remained hidden, their potential value unknown until circumstances required them. Throughout the autumn of 1944, conditions in the camp grew increasingly dire as German defeats mounted and supply lines were disrupted. In January 1945, as Soviet forces approached from the east, evacuation orders were indeed issued. Camp administrators began organizing prisoner marches westward, forced journeys in winter conditions with minimal supplies. These marches, later called death marches by survivors, resulted in high mortality from exposure, exhaustion, and execution of those unable to continue. When selection for the marches began, Helena produced the documents Wunsch had prepared months earlier. "We are classified essential personnel for inventory management," she stated to the supervising officer. "Our skills are required for proper accounting of remaining materials." The officer, overwhelmed with evacuation logistics and unfamiliar with sorting operations, accepted the documentation without thorough verification. Helena, Rosinka, and Gisela were marked to remain behind with a small contingent of prisoners deemed useful for final processing tasks. On January 27, 1945, most camp personnel fled as Soviet forces approached. The remaining prisoners, including Helena and her family, emerged from barracks to meet their liberators. After nearly 3 years of captivity, they stood on the threshold of freedom. Though in a landscape devastated by war and loss, liberation brought its own challenges: physical recovery, displacement, the search for any surviving family members. Helena and Rosinka eventually made their way back to Slovakia, while Gisela chose to emigrate to the newly forming state of Israel, seeking a fresh start after losing her children. The story might have ended there, with survivors and perpetrators dispersing to separate lives. The connection between Helena and Wunsch severed by the collapse of the system that had brought them together. But history had one final chapter to write. In 1964, nearly 20 years after the war's end, investigations into camp personnel led to a series of trials in Frankfurt, Germany. Franz Wunsch was among those identified for prosecution based on his service record. The charges were serious: participation in crimes against humanity, a potential life sentence if convicted. Helena, now living in Bratislava and working as a music teacher, learned of the trial through newspaper accounts. After considerable soul-searching, she made an extraordinary decision. She would testify on Wunsch's behalf. The Frankfurt courtroom fell silent as Helena Citrónová approached the witness stand. Now in her 40s, she carried herself with dignity and composure, despite the painful memories the proceedings evoked. The prosecutor, judges, and spectators all expected testimony further condemning the defendant. Instead, they heard an account that complicated the clear lines between victim and perpetrator. "This man saved my life, my sister's life, and my sister-in-law's life," Helena testified. "He provided food when starvation was policy. He falsified documents to prevent transfers. He gave us warning about evacuations that allowed us to avoid the death marches." When the prosecutor challenged her account, suggesting she might feel misplaced gratitude towards someone who remained part of the camp system, Helena responded with quiet certainty. "I do not forget what happened to my nieces, to my parents, to my community," she said. "Nor do I excuse anyone who participated in that system, but I also cannot forget that within that darkness, this man found enough humanity to recognize mine. And once he saw me as human, he could not unsee it. That recognition spread to others, my sister, my sister-in-law. Each person he helped was someone the system intended to destroy." The testimony created a sensation in the German press. Here was a survivor speaking not of retribution, but of the complexity of human behavior, even within systems of atrocity. While some criticized her stance as too forgiving, others recognized the profound message that humanity can reassert itself even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, and that this recognition, once established, can create expanding circles of protection. Partly based on Helena's testimony and evidence of his actions to protect prisoners, Wunsch received a significantly reduced sentence. After serving 5 years, he was released and lived quietly in Austria until his death in 1989. Helena and Wunsch met only once after the trial, briefly and privately. No record exists of their conversation, but associates reported that Helena emerged from the meeting with a sense of closure. "Some stories have no proper ending," she told a close friend afterward, "only continuing questions about what humans are capable of, both the terrible and the merciful." Helena Citrónová never married but dedicated her life to music education, teaching piano and voice to children in Bratislava. When asked about her experiences during the war, she emphasized not just survival, but the importance of maintaining humanity in inhumane conditions. "What saved me was not just luck or protection," she often said. "It was the refusal to surrender what makes us human, our capacity to see each other beyond the categories others impose. In the darkest places, Sometimes a song, a memory of beauty, can remind someone of shared humanity. And sometimes that reminder is enough to change everything. The story of Helena Citrónová and Franz Wunsch offers no simple moral lessons. It exists in the complicated territory where human connection confronted systematic dehumanization. It reminds us that even within systems designed to eliminate compassion, individual recognition can create spaces of protection, however limited or imperfect. Historical records indicate that approximately 1,200,000 people were processed through the camp system where Helena was imprisoned. Of these, approximately 1,100,000 perished. Helena, Rosinka, and Gisela were among the statistical few who survived, their lives preserved through a combination of useful skills, relative youth and health, and the crucial intervention of someone within the system who chose to see them as individuals rather than numbers. The industrial scale of the operation makes these individual cases of protection all the more remarkable. The German administration had created a mechanized process for eliminating entire populations, with personnel trained to view prisoners as subhuman. Within this machinery, moments of recognition represented profound system failures, breakdowns in the psychological conditioning required for such operations to function. After the war, investigators documented that the sorting facility where Helena worked processed approximately 36 million individual personal items during the camp's operation. Each object represented a life disrupted or ended, clothing worn by real people, photographs of families, children's toys, wedding rings, prayer books. The systematic processing of these belongings was designed to erase individual identity, transforming humans into anonymous masses. Against this backdrop of industrial-scale dehumanization, the connection between Helena and Wunsch represents something historically significant: the resilience of human recognition even within systems engineered to prevent it. Their story demonstrates how ideology can be undermined not by grand resistance, but by the stubborn persistence of human connection. In her later years, Helena spoke to school groups about her experiences, always emphasizing complexity rather than simplistic narratives. "We want history to provide clear heroes and villains," she would tell students. "But human beings are more complicated. The same person can participate in terrible systems, yet find moments of humanity within them. Our challenge is to nurture the capacity for recognition before systems of dehumanization take hold." When Helena died in 2007 at age 88, her obituary mentioned not only her survival, but her testimony that complicated easy historical narratives. Her life encompassed both the worst of human capacity for cruelty and surprising evidence of resilience and recognition. Rosinka lived until 1994, becoming a grandmother to 3 children who grew up hearing carefully shared stories about family history. Gisela built a new life in Israel, eventually remarrying and adopting 2 orphaned children from the conflict. Neither woman spoke publicly about their experiences until the 1970s, when growing historical interest in survivor accounts led them to share their stories with researchers. What remains remarkable about this historical account is not just survival against overwhelming odds, but the demonstration that human connection can penetrate even the most thoroughly dehumanizing systems. The German camp administration had engineered every aspect of the environment to prevent prisoners from being seen as fully human. Yet one voice singing a birthday song created a momentary rupture in that system, a small recognition that expanded over time into a network of protection. Modern psychological research on dehumanization suggests that systems of atrocity depend on categorizing victims as fundamentally different from perpetrators. Once this categorization is disrupted, once individual humanity is recognized, the psychological foundation of such systems begins to crack. The case of Helena and Wunsch provides historical evidence for this theoretical understanding. Perhaps the most profound legacy of this story is its demonstration that humanity is never completely extinguishable, even in environments explicitly designed to eliminate it. The human capacity for recognition and connection persists, creating small spaces of protection amid systematic destruction. For contemporary audiences, this historical account offers no comfortable moral certainties. It exists in the complex territory where human behavior defies simple categorization. It reminds us that systems of dehumanization require constant vigilance as they target the very capacity for recognition that makes us fully human. And it suggests that resistance to such systems might begin with something as simple yet profound as truly seeing another person across imposed barriers of category and circumstance. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.